What if the most powerful moment of your life came from an email sent to someone you barely noticed 20 years ago? In the heart of New York City, a billionaire CEO opens a message that stirs ghosts from high school, ghosts he's tried to forget. But when that message leads him to a woman wearing a mask, both literal and emotional, he's forced to confront who he was and who he could become. Before we begin this deeply moving story of redemption, healing, and second chances, please like this video and subscribe to support more unforgettable stories like this. New York City, the sun was setting behind the towers of steel and glass, casting long golden shadows across the skyline. Inside a gleaming corner office, 35 floors above the bustling streets, Andrew Whitmore sat frozen at his desk. The CEO of Whitmore Digital Solutions, a tech empire he'd built from the ground up, stared at a blinking message on his phone. "You owe me one, Andrew, and it's time to pay up." It was from Daniel Ross, an old classmate from Ridgemont High. The name alone was a blast from the past, a name soaked in memories of school hallways, football games, and senior pranks. But this message? It was strange. It wasn't asking for a business favor or an investment opportunity. No, Daniel wanted something else. "There's a reunion coming up," the next line read, "and I want you to ask Delilah Brooks to be your date." Andrew blinked. Delilah Brooks. The name rang a distant bell, like a song he once heard but couldn't quite place. He opened the file Daniel had attached, a copy of their old yearbook, scanned page by page. It didn't take long to find her. Delilah. Back then, she was a kind of girl who faded into the background, like wallpaper. Always alone, hidden behind thick glasses in her sketchbook, her shoulders curled inward like she was apologizing for taking up space. The others called her names, some cruel, some just careless. And Andrew, he hadn't said much to her at all. He just stood by. Maybe that was worse. He closed the file with a sigh, rubbing his temples. He was a different man now. Older, richer, lonelier. But something about this strange request wouldn't let go of him. His phone buzzed again. "She's a plastic surgeon now. Works with children. One of the best. Look her up." Andrew hesitated and then opened a search tab. A few keystrokes later, there she was. Dr. Delilah Brooks, lead reconstructive surgeon at St. Jude's Pediatric Center in Boston. The photo showed a woman in a white coat, her eyes sharp and thoughtful, her posture straight. She still wore glasses, but now they looked deliberate, almost elegant. There was strength in her expression. Quiet, contained, but undeniable. His chest tightened. What had life done to her? What had she done with her life despite everything he hadn't done? Andrew leaned back, the city lights beginning to twinkle outside his window. For years, he'd surrounded himself with people who wanted something from him. This was the first time someone asked him to give something back. Not money, not status, but maybe a sliver of dignity to someone who once had none. He opened his email. To Dr. Delilah Brooks. Subject, Ridgemont High Reunion. He stared at the blinking cursor. "Dear Dr. Brooks, you may not remember me." No, too formal. He deleted it. "Delilah, Daniel suggested I reach out." Too awkward. He sighed and began typing again. "Hi, Delilah. This might be the most out-of-the-blue email you'll get all week. I'm Andrew Whitmore. We were in the same graduating class at Ridgemont High. Daniel Ross suggested I ask you to the reunion. And honestly, I thought the idea was crazy. Then I looked you up, and I read about what you do. And suddenly it didn't feel so crazy anymore. I don't want to pretend we were friends in school. We weren't. But that's exactly why I'm writing. I'd like to take you to the reunion. Not because of guilt, not because of nostalgia, but because maybe we're both different people now. If this is weird or you'd rather not hear from me again, I understand completely. But if you're willing, I'd really like to hear your story. Andrew." He stared at the words. Then with one long breath, he hit send. Across the country in Boston, Delilah was in the middle of a late-night chart review when the email popped up. She nearly ignored it, but something about the subject line caught her eye. She read it once, then again. And for the first time in years, she felt something stir. Not anger, not pain, something far more dangerous. Hope. Delilah closed her laptop slowly, her eyes still on the message. Andrew Whitmore. In high school, he was the one every girl whispered about. Polished, quiet, with a natural confidence that never needed volume. He never teased her, never laughed like the others, but he never stopped them either. And silence can cut deeper than words. She leaned back in her chair, the buzz of hospital life muffled behind the thick glass walls of her office. The memory of Ridgemont's tiled hallways flickered in her mind like a dusty film reel, laughter that stung, whispers that followed her like shadows, a cafeteria full of turned backs, the feeling of shrinking. She thought she'd buried that version of herself long ago, but the email, it wasn't cruel. It wasn't even trying to make up for the past. It was curious, soft, real. Still, she didn't know if she was ready to be seen by those eyes again, or worse, by the eyes of everyone else who'd already decided who she was before she even opened her mouth. Her phone buzzed. A message from her attending nurse. Or consult in 10. Peds cranio. Urgent. Delilah stood, brushed her coat straight, and tucked her hair behind her ears. An old habit from her teenage years. She caught a glimpse of herself in the office mirror. Glasses, braces. Stronger now, but still carrying pieces of that scared girl. Before stepping out, she paused, sat back down, and opened a new message. To Andrew Whitmore, subject, Ridgemont High Reunion. Andrew, I appreciate your honesty and I admire your nerve for even sending this message. You're right, we weren't friends. And high school was, well, it wasn't kind to some of us. So let's be honest with each other. I'll go to the reunion with you. But on one condition, I'll wear a masquerade mask all evening. No one sees my face until I decide otherwise. If that sounds too dramatic or strange, I understand. But it's the only way I'm walking back into that ballroom. Delilah Brooks. She hovered over the send button for a long second. Then she pressed it, and with that, the past began to stir. That evening, Andrew stood in his kitchen, staring at his phone screen, the reply glowing like a flare in the darkness. He read it once, then twice. A mask? The idea startled him at first, but the longer he considered it, the more sense it made. Maybe not just for her, maybe for both of them. They weren't stepping into a party. They were stepping into a battlefield. And everyone fights differently. He typed back, thumbs unsteady for the first time in years. Delilah, intriguing proposition. Could we discuss it over coffee? No pressure, just a quiet space before we step into the noise. Andrew, Boston, the next morning. Blue Bottle Cafe, 6:58 a.m. Delilah arrived in her scrubs, hair pulled back, stethoscope still slung in her pocket. She almost didn't recognize him. Andrew looked more tired than she remembered, his face older, softer. He stood when he saw her, brushing croissant crumbs off the table. You ordered enough for a small army, she said, eyeing the spread of pastries and bagels. I didn't know what you liked, he said, a little sheepishly. I figured options were safer, and she gave a small smile. I used to bring lunch from home in high school. Braces made everything else too painful to eat. I remember, Andrew said quietly. That made her pause. Did you really, she asked. He didn't answer right away. I remember that you always sat by the windows, alone, drawing. Delilah looked down at her coffee, the aroma filling the silence. So, about this mask. He nodded. I think it's brilliant. She blinked. You do? I work in tech, Delilah. Masks are just another version of firewalls. Sometimes you need a layer between yourself and the world. And sometimes removing it becomes the moment that changes everything. Delilah stared at him, unsure how someone who once looked past her could now look through her so clearly. I'm not doing this for revenge, she said quietly. I'm not looking to stun a crowd or play the Cinderella card. I just need to walk in on my terms. I get that, he said. And I promise not to pull the mask off before you're ready. She looked away, then back at him. One more rule, no photos, not until I say, done. And if anyone asks, we met recently at a medical innovation panel. Which isn't entirely a lie, he grinned. I've been at a few. She shook her head, almost laughing. This is absurd. Ish. Maybe, Andrew said, reaching for the plain croissant she hadn't touched. But sometimes absurd is where all the good stories begin. Yeah, Delilah reached across the table, took the croissant from his hand, and tore a piece. For a moment, the cafe fell away. The past, the pain, all blurred by the quiet understanding between them. Neither said it aloud, but they both felt it. The real reunion had already begun. The workshop smelled like stories, old ones wrapped in lavender polish and copper dust. Tucked into a narrow side street in Boston's North End, Elena Marcelli's mask studio was more legend than storefront. A sign hung above the door, hand-painted in soft gold. Marcelli's Machere, since 1972. Delilah stepped in slowly, the quiet chime above the door announcing her arrival. She felt like a stranger walking into a fairy tale. Elena looked up from her workbench, the silver frame of her glasses catching the lamplight. Her hands, stained with charcoal and gold leaf, hovered over a half-finished mask of feathers and filigree. "You must be the surgeon," she said without preamble. "The one who wants to walk into battle with armor no one else can see." Delilah blinked. "I'm sorry?" Elena smiled. "Daniel called ahead." Of course he did, Delilah thought. That man has a hand in everything. "I need something elegant," she said hesitantly, stepping closer to the scattered array of tools and designs. "But not flashy, something that reframes." Elena tilted her head. "Masks don't change faces, they change stories. What story do you want to tell?" Delilah hesitated. "That I'm not the girl they remember. That I've grown. That I'm not afraid of their eyes anymore." Elena nodded as if she'd heard the same thing 1,000 times in 1,000 different ways. "Sit," she said, pulling over a stool. "Let's begin." 2 hours later, Delilah stepped back into the Boston wind with a sketch in her hand. A delicate design in silver and icy blue, reminiscent of the winter sky. It would curve around her face like a second skin, dotted with glass crystals so fine they looked like stardust. It didn't look like armor. It looked like liberation. She looked down at the sketch again, then at her reflection in a nearby window. Same face, same glasses, same braces, redone years later. But under the street light's glow, something else reflected back. A woman unafraid to be seen, on her own terms. The next evening, Andrew was already at the cafe when she arrived. He had an envelope in his hand and a hopeful smile on his face. "What's that?" she asked, sliding into the booth across from him. "Reading material," he said, "but not for now. I want to hear about the mask." Delilah raised an eyebrow. "You're more into this than I expected." Andrew shrugged. "Tech is all about design. Form meets function. So tell me, what function does yours serve?" She pulled out the sketch and laid it between them. He studied it in silence for a long moment. "It's beautiful," he said finally. "It's precise," she replied. "Every curve frames the features. Every crystal distracts the eye. It says, 'Look at me, but only as I allow.'" "Sounds like you've put a lot of thought into this." "I did," she said, "because for one night I don't want to walk into that ballroom as a memory. I want to walk in as a mystery." Andrew looked up at her, then back at the sketch. "You're not just reclaiming your past," he said softly. "You're rewriting it." She blinked at him, surprised by his insight. He gestured to the envelope. "May I?" She nodded and he opened it carefully. Inside were 2 printed articles, medical research journals. "You read my work?" He looked sheepish. "I may have binge-read every paper with your name on it last night. Your case studies on post-trauma confidence levels in pediatric patients. Groundbreaking." Delilah felt her cheeks warm, not from flattery, from being seen. "You really did your homework," she murmured. "I wanted to understand the person behind the mask." She held his gaze. "And what did you find?" Andrew paused. Then, with complete sincerity, he said, "Someone who spent years rebuilding others, while quietly rebuilding herself." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, the city lights twinkled on like old stars, each one a memory blinking into being. And inside, at a little table cluttered with sketches and research, 2 people sat not in judgment, but in understanding. The Italian restaurant in Cambridge was tucked between a second-hand bookstore and a florist, as if it had grown from poetry and wildflowers instead of bricks. It didn't take reservations, it didn't need them. Delilah arrived first, coat buttoned to the neck, hair loosely tied, a notebook tucked under one arm like a quiet shield. She paused outside, heart hammering harder than it should, not because of nerves, but because, for the first time in years, she was meeting someone not as Dr. Brooks, the surgeon, the department head, the keynote speaker, but simply as Delilah. Andrew was already inside, waiting in a booth near the window, dressed in a soft charcoal blazer and jeans. No tie, no pretense. He looked normal, warm, like the boy he might have been if life hadn't asked him to grow up in armor. "You clean up nicely," she teased as she sat down. "I didn't wear a suit," he pointed out. "As ordered." "Good," she said, setting her notebook down. "Because tonight we're not practicing looking perfect. We're practicing being believable." Andrew laughed. "Are we that unbelievable? To anyone who knew us in high school?" She raised a brow. "Absolutely." They ordered wine, shared bread, talked through everything from reunion logistics to which excuse they'd use if the night went off the rails. But as dinner stretched on, the conversation shifted, softened. They spoke of real things: childhood, expectations, pressure. "How did you end up in medicine?" Andrew asked as the plates were cleared. Delilah traced the rim of her glass before answering. "My mother used to say I had healing hands," she said, a wistful smile flickering across her face. "But it wasn't that. I needed to prove that being different didn't mean being less." He nodded slowly. "So you fixed broken faces because yours was mocked." "I fixed what I couldn't fix in myself," she said softly. "At least, that's how it started." Andrew didn't rush to respond. He let the silence hold the weight of her words. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, lower, more thoughtful. "I spent my 20s building an empire so no one could ever look down on me again," he said. "Funny thing is, now I'd trade half of it just to know what I missed by looking up for too long." Delilah looked at him, really looked, and saw not the boy from the yearbook, not the billionaire from Forbes, but a man relearning how to be human. She leaned back. "So, what are we, Andrew? A project? A photo op? Or just two people running headfirst into a memory?" He met her eyes. "No," he said. "We're two people finally looking at each other without a filter. That's harder than any mask." Delilah's breath caught in her throat. She didn't reply. She didn't have to. Over the next few weeks, they practiced some more. A walk through the park after work. A visit to a bookstore where they got lost between poetry and science fiction. A Sunday afternoon at a public garden where she showed him how she used color and shape in her sketches to visualize reconstructive symmetry. With each moment, the tension between them didn't dissolve. It evolved. They stopped rehearsing for the reunion and started wondering what might follow it. One evening, after a long hospital shift, Delilah came home to find a small package waiting at her door. Inside was a handwritten note. "For the woman who helped me see." She unwrapped the paper gently. It was a book, The Mask of Mirrors by M.A. Carrick. She smiled, sat down, and opened the first page. A second note was tucked inside. "Some masks reveal more than they hide." She closed the book and held it to her chest, eyes misting. For once, someone had given her something that wasn't about her face, her resume, or her victories. It was a mirror, and Andrew, he was no longer looking at who she had been. He was finally seeing who she was. Delilah stood in front of the long, antique mirror in Elena Marcelli's studio, still as stone. The air smelled of lacquer and brass. Evening light filtered through gauzy curtains, casting long, golden streaks across the floor. In her hands, she held the mask. It was finished now. Silver filigree, laced with soft pearl glass, delicate as frost and strong as steel. It fit her face perfectly, hiding everything but her eyes. And those eyes, behind the mask, no longer looked afraid. "You wear it like a crown," Elena murmured from the corner, hands folded. "Most people shrink when the mask goes on. You grow." Delilah didn't speak. She was too lost in what she saw, or perhaps in what she didn't. Finally, she turned to Elena. "You said once that masks can become cages." The artisan nodded. "Yes, when we wear them to disappear." "And if we wear them to reclaim?" Elena smiled. "Then they become doors." Delilah exhaled slowly and lifted the mask from her face. "I don't want to hide anymore, but I do want to choose when I'm seen." "Then you're ready," Elena said. "Bring the dress next week. We'll fit them together. You should enter that ballroom not as a girl returning, but as a woman arriving." Across town, Andrew Whitmore sat in his office long after everyone had gone home. On his screen was an article about St. Jude's Pediatric Craniofacial Center, the place where Delilah worked, where she led groundbreaking surgeries, where children's lives were literally rebuilt under her hands. He hadn't meant to find it. He'd simply been researching the hospital's history out of curiosity. But then a detail caught his eye: the Crawford Whitmore Surgical Innovation Grant. His own anonymous gift from 2 years ago, a $20 million donation quietly given, with no press, no plaque, just a desire to do something meaningful after a period in his life that had felt hollow. And now he saw it. That money had gone to her department, to her. He leaned back in his chair, stunned. He'd been helping her long before he knew it. Was it fate, coincidence? Or was it life's way of offering a second chance when you finally slowed down long enough to notice? His phone buzzed. It was a message from Delilah. "Mask is done. She says it's more than a disguise. It's a beginning. I think she's right." Andrew typed back, "I want to see it when you're ready. No rush." She responded immediately. "I'll bring it to coffee on Friday, early, before the sun." That Friday morning they met again. Not at a cafe this time, but at the hospital's garden courtyard. Delilah wore a thick coat, hair windblown, fingers clutching a simple cloth bag. She didn't say anything as she pulled the mask from it and handed it to him. Andrew held it delicately, as if it were glass. It was breathtaking. But what took his breath away more was the way she looked watching him see it. Not nervous, not hopeful, just present. "This is more than a mask," he whispered. "It's everything I couldn't say in high school," she said. "It's every name I was called, turned into art. It's proof that what tried to break me didn't." He handed it back carefully. "You made something beautiful from something painful." Delilah met his gaze. "So did you." Andrew hesitated, then said it. "Delilah, I think I accidentally funded your surgical center." She blinked. "What?" He told her everything. The anonymous donation, the timeline, how he hadn't realized until just days ago. Her face was unreadable. "You've been helping me?" she asked, almost too softly. "I didn't know it was you, but maybe some part of me did." Delilah stepped back slightly, crossing her arms. "I don't know how to feel about that." "I understand. It's not the money, Andrew. It's that everything we're doing, this, suddenly feels tangled." "I didn't want to hide it," he said. "I almost didn't tell you at all. But I realized something. I don't want to build anything with you that depends on what's left unsaid." Delilah was quiet for a long time. Then she looked down at the mask in her hand. "Then don't say it with money next time," she murmured. "Say it with presence. Say it with honesty." He nodded. "I will." She gave him a long look, one that searched for cracks in his sincerity, and finding none allowed something small to soften in her posture. "I believe you." And with that, they sat down together on the stone bench, the city waking up around them. No crowds, no ballrooms, just a man and a woman, with no masks between them, learning how to be seen. The Grand Rosewood Hotel glittered like a dream at the edge of Central Park. The chandeliers inside the ballroom cast soft light over polished marble, fresh-cut lilies, and a sea of formally dressed strangers who all once shared the same teenage cafeteria. Laughter echoed off the walls, sharp, nostalgic, a little too eager. Delilah sat in Andrew's car outside, her hand resting on the cool surface of Elena's creation. The mask, its silver vines curled like ivy over glassy crystal, it sparkled gently in the dim light. For a moment, it almost looked like a butterfly in flight, fragile but free. "You don't have to do this," Andrew said quietly. Delilah turned to him. "Yes, I do." She took a breath, fixed the mask over her face, and looked in the visor mirror. She didn't see the girl from high school. She saw the woman who survived her. "Ready?" he asked. "No," she said honestly, "but let's go anyway." They walked into the lobby arm in arm, her coat still on, her face still hidden. No one noticed them yet. But at the entrance to the ballroom, Daniel Ross stood waiting. He was dressed in a simple suit, his gray hair slightly unruly. A quiet smile crossed his face as he handed them their name badges. He gave Andrew his with a nod, then handed Delilah one with no name, just a blank white card. She met his eyes. "I figured," he said gently, "you'll write your name when you're ready." She nodded, and for the first time since senior year, she walked through the double doors of that world she once feared. The room pulsed with energy. Crystal glasses clinked. Old songs from 2011 played too loud. Everyone looked a little older, a little softer, but the eyes, the laughter, the roles, they hadn't changed. Andrew held her hand tightly. She was grateful for that. They moved through the room slowly. No one recognized her at first, not behind the mask, not in the way she carried herself now. Then someone did. A shrill voice broke through the crowd. Andrew Whitmore? No way. Ashley Dane, former cheer captain, prom queen, reigning queen bee, now with sharper heels and slightly duller eyes. Ashley approached, glittering in gold. She stopped short when she saw Delilah. And who's this? Delilah didn't answer. She's with me, Andrew said simply. Ashley's eyes narrowed behind her lashes. Mysterious. Is this a thing? Andrew smiled politely. It's a reunion, not a press conference. Ashley laughed too loud. Right. Well, enjoy the nostalgia. As she turned to leave, Delilah spoke, her voice calm, clear. Ashley, the woman froze. Do you still paint? Delilah asked. Ashley blinked. How do you? In sophomore year, you used to sketch flowers in the margins of your math notes. Ashley stared at her, eyes darting across the mask. Do I know you? Delilah smiled behind the silver. You used to, sort of. Then she walked past her. Ashley didn't follow. More classmates approached. Some smiled, some whispered, others looked confused, but no one asked. Because there was something untouchable about the way Delilah moved. She wasn't hiding, she was choosing. Near the center of the ballroom, Daniel raised his glass. Ladies and gentlemen, he called over the microphone, we gathered tonight not just to look back, but maybe, finally, to see each other clearly. The room applauded. Delilah looked at Andrew. Do you want to dance? He asked. She hesitated, then nodded. They walked to the dance floor together, a masked woman and a man who refused to let go of her hand. The music swelled, a slow waltz, familiar. Around them, the room kept whispering. Who is she? Is she someone we knew? Is she famous now? Delilah let them wonder, because for the first time she didn't need them to know. Halfway through the dance, she leaned in close to Andrew's ear. I'm ready. He looked at her, not with surprise, but with understanding. Are you sure? She nodded. Yes, I want them to see. Not for them, for me. He let go of her hand just long enough for her to reach behind the delicate ribbon. She untied the mask slowly. The ballroom paused, like a held breath. And when the mask came off, she looked around, eyes unflinching. Silence rippled, then whispers, then gasps. Delilah Brooks. Some people remembered, some didn't, some pretended they didn't. But all of them saw her now, and she wasn't hiding. Thank you, Andrew whispered. For what? For letting them see the woman I've been seeing all along. Delilah smiled. Then it was worth it. Delilah stood by the edge of the ballroom, sipping water. The mask now hung from her wrist like jewelry, no longer armor, no longer needed. Andrew was chatting across the room with a group of former classmates. She watched him as he laughed, polite and reserved. He glanced at her from time to time, just to make sure she was okay. She was. For the first time in years, she truly was. She turned to head back to him when a voice stopped her mid-step. Excuse me. Delilah turned. It was Jennifer Voss, senior year's golden girl, editor of the yearbook. One of the nice ones who never threw insults but never stopped them either. Delilah blinked. Jennifer. Jennifer looked down, then back up. Eyes soft, voice trembling slightly. I wasn't sure if it was really you, but Ashley confirmed it. Delilah nodded, guarded but not cold. It's me. Jennifer stepped closer. I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but I've been hoping for a moment to speak with you, alone. Delilah tilted her head, unsure where this was going. I have a daughter, Jennifer said suddenly. She just started 6th grade and she's already struggling. Delilah's guards softened just a little. She's bright, Jennifer continued, but quiet. She wears these big glasses and carries books everywhere. Doesn't care about popularity, just exists in her own little world. Sound familiar? Delilah felt a strange tightening in her chest. She came home crying last week, Jennifer went on, her voice cracking. Said the other girls laughed at her shoes. Called her the walking thrift store. And the worst part, is that when she told me, I didn't know what to say because I recognized myself in the girls who hurt her. Delilah looked at her. You see yourself in the ones who laughed at me. Jennifer nodded. And I hated that. I hated that my daughter is now paying for a cruelty I once helped normalize. And I thought maybe if I saw you tonight, I could ask. She swallowed. What would you want me to say to her? Delilah stood very still. No one had ever asked her that before. What would she have wanted all those years ago in that empty hallway when laughter echoed and no hand reached out? She set her glass down slowly and then looked Jennifer in the eye. Tell her she's more than enough, she said softly, even if the world hasn't caught up yet. Jennifer's eyes filled. Tell her kindness is power. That being overlooked means she sees what others miss. That her strength isn't in how loudly she speaks, but in how clearly she listens. Jennifer wiped her eyes, nodding. Tell her, Delilah finished, voice firm now, that being different isn't a weakness. It's a light. And someday that light will burn so bright the ones who mocked her won't be able to look away. Silence. Then Jennifer whispered, thank you. Delilah paused, then added gently, and tell her this too. The ones who hurt her, some of them grow up, some of them learn. And when they do, the best apology isn't words. It's raising daughters who don't make the same mistakes. Jennifer covered her mouth, overcome. I'm trying. Delilah touched her shoulder. I can see that. They stood like that for a moment, two women who had once been girls on opposite ends of a hallway, now meeting in the middle of life and healing quietly, together. Across the room, and Andrew watched Delilah walk back toward him, taller somehow, not in height, in presence. You okay? He asked softly. She nodded. Better than okay. What happened? I think, she said, smiling faintly, I just helped a mother talk to her daughter, and maybe helped a girl I used to be feel a little less alone. Andrew didn't speak. He simply took her hand. And in the quiet glow of the ballroom, surrounded by old names and faded memories, two people stood together, not in the past, not in the pain, but in the present, where healing had finally begun. 3 days after the reunion, the hospital lights hummed softly as morning crept over Boston. Delilah stood in the surgical prep room reviewing patient scans, her usual rhythm of charts, gloves, and quiet focus. She adjusted her glasses, heart still warmed by the strange grace of the weekend. Then a knock on the door. Dr. Brooks, a nurse called gently, the patient's guardian is here for consent. Delilah glanced down at the chart in her hand. Emily Whitmore, age 6, facial trauma from a car accident. The name tugged at her. Whitmore. Her brow furrowed. Before she could ask, the door opened, and there he stood. Andrew, hair tousled, coat thrown on in a hurry, his eyes tired, worried. He froze when he saw her. You're the surgeon? He asked, voice rough. Delilah held up the chart slowly. Emily is your niece? He nodded, stepping forward. My sister's daughter. The accident happened yesterday morning. It was... He stopped, swallowed. She's scared, Delilah, and hurting. I didn't know you were her doctor until I saw your name on the surgical board this morning. Delilah's heart beat faster, but her tone stayed calm. Her injuries are complex but treatable. Some orbital fractures, minor dental displacement, and a long cut across her cheek. No neurological damage. Andrew sat down heavily. Thank God. She looked at him, at the anxiety written all over his face. This wasn't the confident CEO. This was Uncle Andrew. Tired, unshaven, deeply human. I'm so sorry, she said softly. But she's in good hands. My team, we know how to do this. I know, he said, meeting her eyes. That's why I'm okay with her being here. Because it's you. Delilah blinked, and something inside her shifted. The surgery was scheduled for the next morning. That night, Andrew didn't go home. He stayed at the hospital, dozing in a chair beside Emily's bed, answering every question she whispered in fear. Will it hurt? Will I look the same? What if they laugh? And then a small voice. Uncle Andrew, will Dr. Brooks be the one to fix me? He smiled gently. She's the best in the world, Em. Emily blinked up at him. You like her? He chuckled. Is it that obvious? She makes you smile like you're not in charge anymore. He laughed, real and warm. You're too smart. Promise you'll be there when I wake up? He squeezed her hand. I promise. The next morning, Delilah entered the OR like a storm, calm, focused, with the weight of both history and hope in her hands. Her fingers moved with practiced grace, her mind locked into precision, her heart steady. She didn't see Emily as Andrew's niece. She saw her as every child who ever looked in a mirror and wondered if they'd ever feel whole. The surgery lasted 3 hours. Afterwards, she peeled off her gloves slowly, the weight of the moment sinking in. She gave the report to the attending nurse, then walked out to the waiting room. Andrew stood up the second he saw her. "It went well," she said. "Clean reconstruction. Some swelling, of course, but the scarring will fade. In time, you won't even know it happened." Andrew exhaled, tears rising in his eyes. "Thank you." But Delilah hesitated, then added gently, "Andrew, you don't have to keep saying thank you." He stepped closer. "But I do," he said. "Not just for the surgery, for the reunion, for the mask, for letting me be someone new." Delilah swallowed. "We both are," he smiled. "Then maybe it's time we stop rehearsing." She tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said softly, "we've been playing pretend. Dinners, practice conversations, mock introductions. Maybe it's time we try something real." Delilah studied him, then nodded once. "Okay," she said. "Let's see where real takes us." Later that evening, Delilah sat by Emily's bedside while Andrew stepped out for coffee. Emily blinked awake slowly. "Dr. Brooks?" "Yes, sweetheart. You have glasses, embraces, like me." Delilah smiled. "That's right. Did kids make fun of you?" She nodded. "They did." Emily thought for a long moment. "But you still became a doctor?" "Yes," Emily smiled, eyes fluttering closed again. "That's really cool." Delilah sat there, her hand gently resting on the edge of the bed, her throat tight with something like peace. Outside the room, Andrew watched through the glass and smiled, because in that moment he saw the truth. The girl they once ignored had become the woman they now turned to for healing. And she wasn't just fixing faces. She was repairing futures. 2 days after Emily's surgery, the hospital glowed with a quiet calm. The pediatric wing, always filled with soft lights and quiet cartoon melodies, was calm but alive. Nurses moved gently from room to room. Artwork lined the walls. And just outside the play room, Delilah and Andrew walked side by side beneath ceiling mobiles of stars and clouds. Emily had just fallen asleep, surrounded by her favorite picture books and a purple stuffed cat. Her bandages were smaller now, her smile a little brighter. "She asked for Jell-O with glitter," Delilah said, smiling as they strolled. "Glitter, Badur?" Andrew laughed. "Is that even a thing?" "Not officially, but she has influence," Delilah grinned. "VIP status." They paused at the large photo mural at the end of the hallway, a collection of self-portraits drawn by the children after surgery. Some were wobbly, some colorful, others detailed and shaded, but every face was smiling. Andrew stared for a long moment. "I've walked through tech campuses with billion-dollar prototypes," he said quietly. "But this feels like the first thing that actually matters." Delilah glanced at him, then looked back at the wall. "You helped build this," she said, "and not just the wing, the confidence, the second chances, the names these kids will write without shame in school." "I didn't know," he whispered, "when I made the donation. I didn't know it was yours, that it would become this." "You gave it without knowing," Delilah said gently. "That's the kind that means something." She turned and gestured for him to follow. "Come on," she said. "Let me show you the whole picture." She led him down another corridor, past operating rooms, recovery bays, family lounges. Each space had her mark on it, not her name, but her thoughtfulness. Color-coded tiles so kids could follow a rainbow path to appointments. Bookshelves at wheelchair height. Murals painted by local artists, all donated. "This is where we meet before surgeries," she said, pointing to a quiet consultation room. "We let the kids play with the instruments, decorate their masks. We make it feel like they're part of it." Andrew watched her speak. She didn't boast. She didn't explain to impress. She spoke with the clarity of someone doing the thing she was born to do. They stopped at a door labeled simply, Family Reflection Room. Delilah hesitated. "We added this last year, for parents, for siblings, for breathing." She reached for the doorknob. "Do you want to see it?" she asked. He nodded. Inside was a room bathed in soft light, like early morning. Comfortable chairs, soft instrumental music playing somewhere out of sight. A wall of tiny shelves held memory jars, each one filled by families with written notes, drawings, or photos. "Some kids don't come back," she said quietly. "We needed a place where love could stay." Andrew stepped toward the wall, reading the little tags beneath each jar. "So much life," he murmured. Delilah watched him for a moment, then said softly, "This is what your donation built, Andrew. Not just walls, permission for people to hope again." He turned back to her, something deep in his eyes. "Delilah," he said, "why didn't you tell me sooner?" She looked away. "Because I didn't want this to be about debt or guilt or owing each other anything. And now," she met his gaze, "now I want it to be about choosing to keep building something together." Andrew stepped closer. The silence between them was soft now, trusting. Not a pause of fear, but of possibility. He reached out and touched her hand. "I choose that too." Later that evening, they returned to Emily's room together. She was awake, bandages off her cheek now, the tiny stitches clean and pink. "Dr. Brooks," she whispered, "will I look normal again?" Delilah smiled and knelt beside her bed. "You'll look like you, Emily. And you're already amazing." Andrew watched as Emily beamed, shyly reaching out to hug her. As Delilah wrapped her arms around his niece, he realized something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not from money, not from status, but from the quiet presence of someone who had turned pain into purpose. Later, as they stepped into the fading dusk outside the hospital, Andrew turned to her one last time that day. "You know," he said, "the girl I remember from high school, she never talked much." Delilah smiled. "She was scared of her own voice." He reached over and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I'm glad she found it." She looked up at him, glasses fogged slightly from the evening chill, and whispered, "I'm glad you finally heard it." The city blinked quietly outside Delilah's apartment window. The skyline was dusted in gold and violet, the hum of taxis and wind echoing faintly from below. Inside it was warm. Soft music played on an old speaker. The scent of cinnamon and tea floated from the kitchen. A quiet comfort filled the air, the kind that doesn't need candles or decor. Just the hush that lives between people who are no longer pretending. Delilah sat cross-legged on the couch in sweatpants and a faded college hoodie, hair damp from a quick shower, glasses slightly crooked. Her braces glinted when she smiled. Not out of nervousness, but out of habit. Andrew sat across from her, sleeves rolled up, sipping from a blue ceramic mug she'd offered him earlier. "You don't strike me as someone who takes a night off easily," she teased. "Only for a world-class surgeon who makes a mean pot of chamomile," he grinned. She smirked. "High praise coming from a billionaire who probably has 3 executive chefs." He shrugged. "They don't put honey in it the way you do." A pause. Then they both smiled, a little too long to be casual. Outside, rain tapped gently at the windows. Inside, silence settled between them like a third guest. Not awkward, just patient. Delilah leaned back against the cushions. "Can I ask you something?" Andrew looked up. "Of course," she hesitated. "Why maple pie?" His brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she looked down at her tea, swirling it slowly. "Why did you really send that email? You could have invited anyone to that reunion. Someone easier, less complicated. Someone who wouldn't make you explain the past." Andrew set his mug down. "I didn't want easy," he said quietly. "I wanted real." Delilah looked at him, unsure what to say. He leaned forward slightly. "I spent 10 years building something I could be proud of. But the older I got, the more I realized I didn't know if I was someone I could be proud of." Delilah said nothing, letting the words land where they needed. "And then I saw you," he continued. "Not in a photo, not in a yearbook, but in articles, speaking at conferences, changing lives. You'd done the one thing I hadn't." "What's that?" she asked softly. "You faced everything that tried to silence you, and you answered back." Delilah's throat tightened. "I sent that email," Andrew said, "because I needed to know you, the woman you became. And maybe, just maybe, I hope she'd let me try to become someone better too." She looked at him for a long moment, the tears rising slow and full. You know, she whispered, it's not the surgeries or the lectures that made me strong. Andrew tilted his head. It was the quiet moments, the ones where I walked past a mirror and didn't flinch, the ones where I let someone see me and didn't apologize for how I looked, or how I felt, or how I shook. She paused, then added, I still have masks, Andrew. Invisible ones. I still worry that if people really knew me, they'd turn away. Andrew stood up slowly and crossed the room. When he reached her, he knelt gently in front of the couch. I see you, he said. Not the girl in braces, not the doctor in the white coat. You. And I'm not going anywhere. She blinked, tears rolling down without shame now. He reached up, fingers brushing her cheek gently. I don't want the version of you that's polished or perfect, he said. I want the woman in sweatpants. The one who still sleeps with two pillows even when she's exhausted. The one who makes her own tea and fixes other people's faces, but still hasn't fully forgiven her own reflection. Delilah let out a soft, broken laugh. You memorize my pillow count? He smiled, eyes shining. That and the fact that you hum when you're concentrating? She shook her head, laughing through tears now, and then she whispered, you really see me. He nodded. Yes, and if you'll let me, I'd like to stay. She leaned forward, forehead resting gently against his, and for the first time in her life, Delilah Brooks felt completely, entirely unmasked. No judgment, no past, no armor, just her. And the man who had chosen to see every inch of her light. The annual St. Jude's Pediatric Surgical Gala was always a formal affair. All glassware and evening gowns, warm candlelight flickering over polished silver, tables lined with name cards, centerpieces of white roses and pale blue hydrangeas, soft jazz humming under the clink of wine glasses. But this year felt different, because this year they were honoring the surgical wing's anniversary, and the anonymous benefactor who made it all possible had agreed to reveal himself. Delilah stood just off stage in a midnight blue gown, hair gently pinned, her glasses still perched proudly on her nose. No mask, no script, just herself. Andrew, now at the podium, adjusted the microphone. The room fell into a hush. He didn't have note cards. He hadn't rehearsed. But he didn't need to, because he wasn't giving a speech. He was telling the truth. Good evening, he began, his voice steady, his eyes sweeping across the room of hundreds. I was asked to talk about philanthropy tonight, to explain why I made the donation that helped create the Crawford Brooks Pediatric Surgical Wing, to talk about giving back. A pause. He let the words breathe. But the truth is, I didn't give anything at all. Not really. Not compared to what I've received in return. There was a ripple of curiosity in the audience. He continued, years ago I made a donation, quietly, anonymously. I thought it was enough to write a check and walk away, to feel better about who I was without ever really changing. He looked down for a second, then up again, eyes warmer now. But life has a way of bringing you back to the places you tried to forget. And sometimes, if you're lucky, it brings you face to face with someone who shows you who you could be. He looked toward the side of the stage, at her, and he smiled. I'd like to tell you a story, Bum, he said, about a girl who was once invisible. She wore braces and big glasses and walked through school hallways with her head down, not because she was weak, but because no one ever gave her a reason to look up. A few audience members exchanged glances. That girl, Andrew said, voice firmer now, grew into a woman who became a world-class surgeon. She spends her days fixing what others think is broken, not just with her hands, but with her belief that everyone deserves to be seen clearly, no matter what they've been through. Silence, not one cough, not one fork clinked. Andrew's voice softened. She taught me that masks don't always hide shame. Sometimes they protect hope until it's ready to step into the light. He took a breath. She taught me that healing doesn't happen in silence. It happens in truth. But then, with the kind of reverence usually reserved for saints or first dances, he said, ladies and gentlemen, may I introduce you to the true reason we're here tonight, Dr. Delilah Brooks. The applause started softly, then swelled like a wave. Delilah stood frozen for a heartbeat. Then she stepped out from the curtain. No one whispered. No one laughed. They stood, hundreds of people, standing for her. She crossed the stage with calm steps, her hand brushing briefly against Andrew's, as they passed. He moved aside, offering her the spotlight, and she, for the first time, didn't flinch from it. "Thank you," she said quietly into the microphone. Her voice held even as her heart thundered. "Some of you know me as a surgeon. Some of you, Maori, may know me from a very different time, a very different story." There were still faces in the room from her high school. Not many, but enough. "I used to think the world would only see me if I changed," she continued, "that I had to look different, speak differently, be someone more acceptable, less strange." A pause. "But I was wrong." She looked toward Andrew. "I didn't need to change who I was. I just needed to believe that who I was deserved to be seen. And I needed someone brave enough to look." Andrew smiled, eyes glassy. "So tonight I accept this recognition not as a doctor or a guest, or even as a donor's grateful colleague, but as a woman who no longer wears masks." She stepped back from the microphone, and the applause rose again, not just for her words, but for her presence. Afterward, in the quiet of the balcony outside the ballroom, Andrew found her alone, leaning on the railing under a soft city sky. "Hey," he said, voice low. "Hey," she whispered without turning. "You were incredible." She smiled faintly. "I didn't faint, so that's something." He stepped beside her. "You told them the truth. That's more than most people ever do." She looked at him then, searching. "I didn't do it for them, you know." "I know. I did it for me." "And that," he said, stepping closer, "is exactly why it mattered." A beat. Then she looked up at him. "I'm still scared sometimes," she admitted, "that I'll wake up and this will all vanish, that I'll be back in that hallway, clutching my books, pretending not to hear the laughter." Andrew reached for her hand. "Then I'll walk that hallway with you," he said, "every time." She breathed in, and then softly, "You already are." The pediatric wing of St. Jude's bustled with the gentle rhythm of healing. Beeping monitors, soft laughter, the rustle of cartoon-patterned scrubs as nurses move from room to room. In recovery room 2B, Delilah stood beside Noah, a 7-year-old boy with a cleft lip just newly repaired. His head was wrapped in soft gauze, his voice still groggy from the anesthesia, but his curiosity was fully awake. He blinked up at her as she adjusted his IV drip. "Dr. Brooks?" he whispered, lips slightly swollen. "Yes, sweetheart." He pointed to the photo ID clipped to her coat. "Are you married?" Delilah froze for just a second. She smiled gently, crouching down beside him. "No, I'm not." Noah frowned. "But you're pretty and nice. My mom says girls like that get married first." Delilah chuckled softly. "Your mom sounds wise." Noah leaned closer. "I think you should marry someone who makes you laugh and who doesn't care if you have braces." Delilah blinked, then smiled genuinely, a little mist in her eyes. "That sounds like a very good plan." Noah thought for a second. "Do you know someone like that?" She paused, and this time the smile that touched her lips felt different. "I think I do." Later that day, Delilah stood at the large window in her office, arms folded, staring out at the gray Boston skyline. The question kept circling in her mind, not just, "Are you married?" but everything it meant beneath the surface. Are you waiting? Are you afraid? Are you finally ready to believe that you deserve more? The knock on her door was soft. Andrew stepped in, holding 2 coffees, one black, one with a splash of oat milk, hers. "I heard you had a very forward little patient today," he said, setting the cup on her desk. She raised an eyebrow. "Word travels fast." "The nurses love him," he grinned. "Apparently he gave your future quite the nudge." Delilah smiled, sipping slowly. "He asked if I was married, then told me I should be." Andrew leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "Smart kid." There was a pause, a warm one. Then he said quietly, "What did you tell him?" "I said I wasn't." "And that's it?" She met his gaze. "I said, I think I know someone." Andrew looked at the floor for a moment, then back at her. "Delilah," he said softly, "I know we've taken this slow. I know we both came here with scars. But every time I see you walking through this building, strong, steady, unshaken, I realize something." She waited. "I don't want to keep building a future you're not in." Her breath caught in her throat. "I don't know where we go from here," he continued, "but I know that I want to walk beside you, not in a fantasy, not in some rehearsal, but for real." Every day. Delilah stepped closer. The words came quietly but with certainty. Then let's stop wondering, she said. Let's stop waiting. Let's begin. He didn't kiss her. Not yet. Instead, they held each other's gaze for a long time. And in that look, full of laughter, pain, healing, and the kind of hope that only comes after years of silence, they made a promise. We are no longer the people we were. We are the people we choose to become, together. That evening, as the lights dimmed and the halls quieted, Delilah passed by Noah's room again. He was already dozing, a toy robot tucked under his arm. But taped to the side of his monitor was a crude drawing. A stick figure with glasses and a doctor's coat, standing beside a taller stick figure with messy hair and a coffee cup. Above it was written, Dr. Brooks and her laughing man. She smiled, and gently she took the drawing and tucked it into her pocket, not as a souvenir, but as a beginning. The sun filtered gently through the windows of the newly completed Crawford Brooks Pediatric Wellness Wing, a space of color and calm, of laughter and learning. Unlike the surgical wing, this area was designed not for urgent healing, but for restoration. Therapy rooms, family lounges, art studios, and a new indoor garden where children in wheelchairs could tend to flowers taller than they were. Delilah walked slowly down the corridor, her heels echoing quietly. Her white coat fluttered slightly behind her. In her hand, she held a pair of gold-handled scissors, part of the ribbon-cutting ceremony happening just minutes from now. But her thoughts weren't on speeches or donors. They were on a little girl who had just returned to visit, Emily. Now 7 years old, with her hair in two fuzzy pigtails and a sparkly pink headband, Emily sat in the new reading nook, completely absorbed in a picture book. When she saw Delilah approaching, she leapt up with a grin. Dr. Brooks! Delilah bent down to catch her in a hug. Hey, superstar, she whispered. Emily beamed. Her scar, now faint and soft, barely touched her cheek. Her eyes sparkled like always. You promised you'd still be here when I came back, Emily said proudly. Delilah touched her nose. And you know what? I keep promises. Emily looked up at her, more curious now. Are you and Uncle Andrew still dating? Delilah laughed. We're something better. What's better than dating? Delilah smiled. You'll see. Outside, the crowd gathered around the ribbon arch. Hospital staff, families, community members. Reporters stood off to the side, ready to capture the moment. Andrew stepped onto the small stage, dressed simply in slacks and a soft gray sweater. No tie, no title badge, just himself. He waved at Emily in the front row, then reached for Delilah's hand. The two of them stood behind the ribbon, side by side. When the countdown ended, they cut it together. The gold scissors glinting in the light, the fabric falling with a soft flutter. Applause broke out, but for a moment Delilah heard none of it, because Andrew was whispering something only she could hear. You know, he said, I thought the best thing I ever built was a company, but it turns out it's this life with you. She turned to him and smiled. I think we're just getting started. Later, as the guests mingled, Andrew and Delilah walked the new hallway hand in hand. Children darted around them with crayons and therapy dogs. Nurses laughed. A guitar strummed softly in the distance. They stopped at a new art installation, a mural made from tiles created by patients over the past year. Each tile held a name, a drawing, or a word. Hope, strength, new. Delilah touched one with a small heart and the initials E.W. Andrew looked at her. You okay? She nodded. More than okay. They stood in silence, letting the joy settle like dust in sunlight. Then Andrew cleared his throat. I've been thinking, he said slowly. Oh? That apartment of yours with the crooked cabinet and the tea kettle that squeaks. She raised an eyebrow. Yes? I think, he said, it's time you gave me a drawer. She blinked. A drawer? He nodded. One drawer, for now. And then, maybe a second. And one day, a set of keys. Delilah laughed, heart swelling. Start with the drawer, she said softly. We'll work our way up. That night, after the celebration ended and the hospital lights dimmed, Delilah stood at the glass window in her office, sipping tea. Andrew walked in, now barefoot, jacket off, tie long gone. You left your mug in the break room, he said, setting it beside her. She looked at him, then out at the quiet garden below. the fairy lights twinkling between tulips and sunflowers. I used to think I'd always be alone, she said suddenly. Andrew leaned on the windowsill beside her and, why? Because I thought no one could love someone who had to fight so hard to love herself. His hand found hers. You were wrong. She nodded. I know that now. Below them, Emily and her mother exited the main doors, waving up at the windows as they left. Emily twirled once in her sparkly dress. Delilah watched her go, feeling something like peace. Andrew leaned in close. What are you thinking? Delilah smiled. That I'm ready. For what? For the rest of this. She turned to him fully now, touching the lapel of his jacket. I'm ready to live without the mask, to love without the fear, to finally believe that this is my life, and I get to have it. Andrew kissed her forehead. You do. They stood together like that, the doctor and the tech CEO, the broken kids they once were, and the wholehearted adults they had become. And in the quiet of that glass-framed moment, beneath the stars and the laughter that still echoed in the halls, they didn't speak of forever. They simply lived like it was already theirs. It had rained earlier that day, just enough to make the sidewalks glisten, the garden outside their brownstone smell like earth and time. Inside, the air was warm. Laughter rose from the kitchen, where Emily and two other former patients, now fully recovered, helped decorate a tray of cookies with far too many rainbow sprinkles. The adults gave up trying to stop them after the first hour. Delilah stood by the sink, apron dusted with flour, her hair in a loose ponytail. She was barefoot, smiling, rolling dough with her elbows in. Andrew entered behind her, holding a ceramic tray of lemonade soon. I underestimated how much sugar a room full of children can consume, he murmured, kissing the top of her head. Rookie mistake, she grinned. He set the tray down and watched her for a moment. No stethoscope, no scrubs, just Delilah. His Delilah. Remind me again, he said, how we got talked into hosting a welcome home party for a child we met 10 days ago. Delilah wiped her hands on a towel. Because he was afraid no one would remember his name. And you said, I said, Andrew interrupted, mimicking her voice, we'll remember it for you. Exactly, she nodded. So we had to prove it. In the living room, a dozen hand-drawn cards covered the table. Welcome home, David, was written in marker on a poster board above the fireplace. Someone had glued googly eyes to a balloon. Someone else had drawn stick figures of Andrew and Delilah holding cake. And on the mantel, next to framed photos of the surgical center and a few scattered vacation pictures, sat a single sketch. The mask, Elena's original creation, drawn in pencil, quiet and powerful. Framed, but never worn again. Delilah caught Andrew looking at it. You kept it, he said softly. She joined him. It reminds me, she said, that I don't need it anymore. He reached for her hand, and that I was lucky enough to see what was behind it. Later that evening, as the kids played card games on the rug and the house hummed with soft music and distant chatter, Delilah slipped away to the bedroom for a moment of breath. She opened the dresser, pulled open the drawer, and smiled. It wasn't just Andrew's drawer anymore. It held a little bit of both of them. A watch, a folded hoodie, a pair of reading glasses, a stack of sticky notes from the hospital, a pen she'd borrowed and kept, a half-read novel. Nothing fancy, but everything real. She touched the edge of the drawer, not as a habit, as a choice. Outside the room, Andrew peeked in. You okay? She turned to him. Yes, she said, just remembering how far we came. He crossed the room and pulled her into a hug, and as she rested her head against his chest, he whispered, I think we're still coming. She laughed into his shirt. Good, because I like where we're going. That night, after the guests had gone and the lights dimmed, Delilah curled up on the couch with a cup of chamomile tea and her feet tucked beneath her. Andrew joined her, a blanket over their laps, the fireplace crackling gently. They didn't speak for a while, because they didn't have to. The silence between them was not emptiness. It was home. In the hallway, the drawing from young Noah still hung on the wall, the one with the stick figures and the words, Dear Dr. Brooks and her laughing man. Below it, Delilah had added something in her neat handwriting, a small note that read, We're still laughing, and we're not done yet. Dear me, Toy, I know you won't believe this now, not as you sit at the back of the classroom, tracing the cracks in your desk and trying not to make eye contact. But I see you. I remember how your braces hurt so much you learned to smile without showing your teeth. I remember how you pulled your sleeves down to your wrists in the summer because someone said your arms were too skinny. I remember how you stopped raising your hand in class, not because you didn't know the answer, but because it was easier to disappear than to be seen and misunderstood. And I know what you think, that no one sees you, that you are destined to be background noise in everyone else's story. But I'm writing to tell you something. You were wrong, not because the world suddenly became kinder, not because you changed your face, your laugh, or the way you walk, but because one day you decided that you were worth knowing, and everything changed. You became a doctor, a surgeon actually, one of the best. You spent your days holding the hands of children before they went under anesthesia, and your nights reviewing case studies and drawing sketches of how to help their little faces heal. You didn't fix them because they were broken. You helped them see themselves more clearly, because deep down, you always wanted that for yourself. And one day, a man walked into your life, someone who once stood in the background, not cruel, just silent. And instead of pretending to be someone he wasn't, he sat down across from you, offered you coffee and honesty, and said, I see you now. I'm sorry I didn't before. You didn't fall in love overnight. You grew something slower, truer. You laughed, you trusted. You let him see you, not just the parts you'd polished, but the messy, quiet, anxious places you used to hide. And he stayed. More importantly, you stayed with yourself. There were no fairy tales, no glass slippers, just one drawer that became two. A welcome home party for a child who needed it. A quiet night under soft lights and mismatched mugs. And the understanding that you are not beautiful because they say so. You are beautiful because you stopped waiting for permission to belong. So here's what I want you to know. Keep going. You don't have to be louder. You don't have to be shinier. You don't even have to be brave all the time. You just have to keep walking, one quiet, shaky step at a time, toward the life that already has space waiting for you. Because it's there and you will fill it with joy, with purpose, with a laugh that someone once called strange and someone later called home, with love that doesn't save you because you never needed saving. Just someone to walk beside you while you save yourself. With all the love we never knew we'd grow into, Delilah,